Welcome to our introduction to mixed media. I'm so glad you've joined into this workshop. Yay! So basically this workshop, I take you step by step how I create this painting here. And the idea behind just doing a step by step through a complete painting is that I want you to be able to take the techniques and things that I use to create your own work, and then obviously what doesn't resonate with you, you don't need to take. But I just want you to have a great time and just let yourself go. Don't put too much pressure on yourself and just have fun with it. And I can't wait to see how you go with it.
Okay, so first off, we've got our blank canvas. Now, my canvases that I buy pretty much always have a gesso painted finish, which is just that white sealed paint on it. Now, about a year ago, I started actually painting my background, my canvases a dark colour. After studying TAFE again for another year, one of my teachers explained that if you start off with a really dark color on your canvas, it actually brings a lot more vibrancy and richness to your finished artwork. And I noticed that some of the other artists that I love, they although they work in oils, some of these artists, they all seem to start with a dark background. So I started to do that, and I just love the finished look that I get quite a bit more. Now, I still do some, if I'm doing a really light painting, I'll still just keep it white background and go from there. But it's something to think about when you're doing your painting. What I want to say is, if you're going to do a dark background like I'm doing here, please get a bigger paintbrush. This paintbrush took me so long. I've actually fast forwarded this video because it took me about 12 minutes. And it's just a waste of time. So just grab yourself a big brush. It can even be just a house painting brush. You can get them for around $5 from Bunnings. Also, the paint I used was actually a structure paint from Derivian, and they are beautiful for painting with, but for just a big solid background, it's quite thick and difficult to work with. So I actually ended up watering it down quite a bit towards the end, so I didn't waste all of the paint. This colour is Payne's Grey, which is a beautiful sort of grey with a blue tint through it, and I love that. But you could use like a purple or a blue or a dark green, anything to what your sort of colours you're drawn to and you're thinking about you're going to use in your painting. Sort of go with a background dark version of that. So with this background paint, we'll cover the sides at this point. That is because once I get stuck into a painting, I tend to forget about the sides. So I have had paintings that I've loved, and then I get to the finished part and realise I haven't painted around the sides. And although a lot of people nowadays will have their canvas art framed, that will hide any blank side edges that you've not painted, that's not always an option. And framing a canvas is actually quite expensive unless you're really clever and can do it yourself. A canvas of this size will probably cost a couple of $100s to get framed. So I now always just paint the edges of my background painting on that first layer. So if I forget to do it in any other future layers, it doesn't matter. As you can see here, I'm not using a palette or anything. I'm literally just squirting the paint straight out onto the canvas. I'm then watering it down quite a bit because, like I said, I use that really thick structure acrylic paint, which it's just it's really thick and hard to work with on large scale like this. So I would recommend not using a structure paint, just use one that goes on nicely. I think the only difference really is that they're a bit more watered down, the flowy paints. But also, obviously, you want to make sure that your work surface is covered and protected. So I've just got a big brown piece of really large scale paper on my work table. Normally I would paint at an easel, but I just wanted it to be really clear for this workshop, the full process, and I just found it to be easier to show and record the process that I go through. So that's why I'm working on a flat table. So it's just literally colouring in your canvas with a dark colour. Like I said, that's optional. You don't have to do this part. You can keep it white if you choose. Now with this one, I actually started to let the background dry a little bit, but I prefer to keep it a bit wet.
Now we're just going to do a really beautiful painted layer. So we're using a few different colours, and the idea of this layer is just to give it some nice different designs, just some different colours. So this will be sort of the main base of the finished painting. The colours that I've gone for are sort of purpley blues and greens to match in with that nice dark background. I did wait until the Payne's Grey was dry. Normally I would actually start doing these layers when that first layer is still a bit wet, because I find it easier to blend the colours in. It depends what look you're after. So in this one, when I'm blending the colours in together, I sort of want to have a little bit of a cloudy effect, so when they combine it's sort of quite a smooth transition. Now sometimes I use my finger to get this transition from one colour to the next. In this one, because that base was completely dry, I found that I didn't like the look that my finger gave, so I actually just used the brush really lightly. Like in this pit here, I'm just really lightly going over that brush. The drier the brush I found, the better for that blending, because it's just really light feathering on the join areas where I'm trying to blend it in and give it sort of a nice soft transitional look from one colour to the next. At this point I could have just stuck with these three colours, these three base colours. However, I've decided to add a bit of green because I sort of have a vision for this painting that I want it to be quite colourful. When you're creating yours, really just go with what feels right. I'm all about intuitive painting and art making, not at all thinking, okay, is this the right way to do it? What rules should I be following? How is it going to be perfect at the end? Just don't think about the complete finished product when you're halfway through at this stage, or not even halfway through. Just really go with your instincts, pick colours that you're really drawn to, and just remember, if you're using colours that you don't love, you can always go over them. You're going to see I'm actually using some more of that Payne's Grey paint, which is that base colour I used to first give the canvas a background, because I wanted that to sort of still be quite a bit of a feature of the background, and I wanted to blend it in with the lighter colours. Here, this is an example of where I say go with your instinct, but remember, if you don't like it, you can always paint over it. So here I've done this red, pinky red colour and this more greener green, but as soon as I got it on there, I'm just like, no way, that does not go. I don't know about you, but I do not like that at all. So I've instantly just wet my paintbrush, rinsed off that pinky red and gone straight over it with the purple. It's back to the colour it should be again. So really don't be scared to play with colours that you might not be sure how it's going to end up. Just go with your instinct, and if it doesn't work, just paint straight over it with another colour. Easy as that. I want you to really enjoy this process. I want it to be a really calming, meditative process for you, which relaxes you, calms your mind. I don't want you to be in that state where you're like, oh my gosh, what if I do this red and it wrecks it and it'll look silly? Especially for this layer here, it's all about just having a go and seeing what happens. And if it doesn't work out, you just go straight over the top. And this whole painting process, which is my favourite way to create art, is all about that too. At every stage, you'll be using your intuition to pick out colours and patterns and papers and things, and you don't have to worry about it at all, because if it doesn't work out, you can literally just go over it. Now you'll see I'm going crazy with my hand blending here. I just love using my fingers and getting really dirty when I'm playing with paint. So at the beginning I wasn't loving the effect that blending with my fingers had, but at this point, because I've got quite a bit of paint on the page and it's sort of started to dry, when it gets to that tacky wet phase, that's when I find I can blend really nicely and get the look that I'm after, rather than when it first goes down onto the canvas. So I don't know about you, but I love this sort of look where it's kind of blended but kind of not, and it's really starting to come together now. We've got nearly the whole canvas filled with the paint, and if you wanted to stop putting the paint down at this point, you totally could. It's got a really nice look how it is. This is where it's such an individual thing with mixed media painting. You can really just make it your own and go with what really draws you. So I sort of tend to fill the whole canvas with all the different paint, but I really like it
like if I had have stopped at this phase, you'd make a really beautiful piece that's more focused on the center of the canvas rather than the whole canvas. And now at this point, I'm really just using my hand just to sort of really blend it all in and see how it sort of get it to that nice effect that I'm looking for. Now remember, the effect that you're looking for might be quite different to the effect I'm looking for. So you might want it totally smooth and blended, or you might want it quite sharp with just really strong paint strokes in the blending of the colors. It's really up to you. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. And now here you can just see I'm just adding some more of that Payne's Grey again, just to sort of really fill the gaps and give it some nice joining aspects as far as making it have the look that I'm after with this particular painting. Now at this point you could actually go crazy. You could actually spend hours and hours just blending. So I just want to give you a little sort of warning. Don't get too caught up in getting a perfect look. It's cool to spend time, like, and I've sped this video up, but I spent probably a good hour on this part of the process. But you can get really trapped into like, oh my god, I just need to get rid of that stroke or paintbrush stroke or fingerprint, or so just keep in mind that you've got to move on to the next phase at some point too. This is a good time to probably take a step back and have a look at your canvas and see what more you feel like you need to do. I did this and then decided it needed a little bit more the darker sort of aqua tones, and I've just blended that actually with my paintbrush instead of my fingers, and then I've added in a little bit more purple up the top just to finish it off. And then I'm just finishing it off, sort of filling those last few gaps. Now, taking a step back and you're really still not 100% sure, sometimes I will actually take a photo of my work in progress and look at it through the phone, like just with my phone, and just look at it through the photo. And that sometimes gives me another perspective. I don't know what it is, but I pick up stuff. I look at it through a photo that I don't necessarily pick up when I'm looking at the piece in real life. So that's a little tip just to give yourself another perspective. Take a little photo and have a look at it and see what you feel like, if it's nice and balanced or if it needs a little bit more darker or lighter color, or a little bit more mixing in some and blending in some areas. Okay, and then I'm just adding that darker sort of green in there down the bottom. Now you'll see I'm using my paintbrush, which is quite wet, and then I'm dabbing it onto the paper. I honestly just use a little bit of toilet paper or paper towel. It's always really good idea to have some paper towel or a rag, or if you haven't got either of those, few sheets of toilet paper works just fine, just to dab your brush on to dry it out a little bit if it is a little bit too wet, because like I said earlier, I find it easier to blend the colors as well when the paintbrush is a little bit drier. Now I'm just finishing off the bottom part of this canvas, so we're just doing some more darker colors and then I'll blend all that in. Just get it to where you're happy with it. I'm using my finger a lot towards the end here. And then you're going to let this layer dry completely before you go on to the next layer. So this layer, I'm just going to map out the lines for the leaves and the vines. So I've gotten a green that's slightly different to the one I used for the base. It's more of a sort of a natural green. And literally, again, just using my gut instincts, just laying out some lines that will be the vines for the painting. So now before you go crazy and just lay out heaps of lines with this one, do consider the look that you're after. I probably didn't consider this too much. These first 3 lines are fine, but to be honest, this one that I'm doing right now, I probably wouldn't have done that if I was to think about it a little bit more. I'm not entirely happy with how that goes right across the top of the painting there, but hopefully you'll see at the finished project it turned out quite well. And then once you've finished doing your line work, take a step back and just have a look at your painting. Check out the composition. Are you happy with it? Do you feel like it's even and well thought out? Now, if you want to add a couple of extra lines, now's the time to do it. Otherwise, you can just sort of go over the ones you've done already and just sort of thicken them up and make them a little bit more solid lines. I'm doing a little bit of a mix of a lighter green and a darker green, but we'll go into more detail with that down the track. And now comes the fun part. So now we're going to start blocking out the leaves. So I, again, have not really pre-thought what sort of leaves or looks I'm going for. I'm just sort of going with my instincts and blocking them out, just how I think, feels like it's the right way to do it. Now you'll notice I'm really not doing anything specific yet. I'm not making them into actual proper leaves at this point. I'm literally just blocking out the space where the leaves will be. So with this painting, some leaves are going to be painted, some are going to be paper. So I'm just really not spending a lot of time on the individual leaves at this point. I'm just going to do the whole layer of blocking out the leaves and the positioning of the leaves, and then we go into more detail with those individual leaves. You notice that I actually am doing a few different shapes and sizes. This is because with my style of mixed media painting, I just love to give a really varied look. So this painting, all these different vines are going to have different characteristics of the leaves. So it's like a whole heap of different plants have been jumbled up together, and it's going to have a really cool, fun look at the end. So just for interest, so really just whatever shapes you want to use. I'm using a mixture of large and small, thin and thick, and just sort of so that also it gives the representation that some might be in the foreground and others are in the background. This is just a really fun, no pressure phase. Again, if you make a mistake, you can paint over it, no problem, or cover it with paper. So it's really just blocking out the structure of how the painting is going to look towards the end. I'm starting to get a really good idea at this point how the finished piece is going to be looking. Now with your painting, like this is just an introduction, so it's really just to show you the way to set up your layered painting, just adding those basic details, and then on the next layer is where you start to give those shapes and lines a lot more detail. With the paint, the green that I'm doing, it is a bit further away to see the detail, but I've got a bit of a dark green on one side of my palette, then I've got the mid green, and then I've got some white. So I'm sort of dabbing the middle, but then with a little dab of a little bit of the dark and a little bit of the light as well, so that particularly on the lines, the vines themselves, it's giving a little bit of a light and dark look. So one side's a bit more darker and one side's lighter. Now this is where, for me, the fun really starts. We've done the background layers, we've done the blocking out of the detail layer. Now we get our Mod Podge, which is what I just showed you on the camera, and we get our pattern paper. Now I've gone through, I have lots of pattern paper. Okay, I used to be a mad scrapper years ago, scrapbooker, and I've got heaps of pattern papers still from that. I also collect old like music sheets. If I've found books in op shops that have some pages torn out or damaged, I keep them because I often use them in my artwork. So that's what you see here. The pile I've got just on the left side of the camera is basically just a few colors. I've gone through my whole pile of papers and I've selected some nice, like I'm looking at sort of pinks, blues, aquas, greens, and more natural, like with book pages and music pages. So I've already pre-done that off camera. So the pile I've got there is what I'm going to choose from as I'm working on this project. And again, like with the paint, I'm just going to go with my intuition, go with what feels right. That's how I choose the colours and patterns that I'm going with. So I've started with just some old book pages. So if you haven't got any papers like this, I highly recommend going to your local op shop and going through their book section. You can get books for really cheap at op shops these days, or your local flea market or garage sales. They can be damaged or not damaged, whatever you choose. You can get all sort of pattern papers as well. Craft shops, there's not many independent craft shops left these days. You can go to Spotlight or Linkcraft, or there's lots of independent ones online. Also Etsy. Even just your packaging though that comes into your house, if you've got some really nice patterned packaging, I just keep all of my pattern papers and scrap papers in a big tub. And when I'm doing a project like this, I'll go through them and just pull out the colours and styles that I'm going to maybe use in the project. Then I sit it next to me like I have with this canvas and just go through it as I'm using, and I just go for the designs that I'm drawn to at that moment. Well, as you can see, I've just got my pair of scissors and I'm just cutting really rough leaf shape out of the paper. Then I'm just getting the Mod Podge, and firstly I'm placing it out before I stick it down to make sure it's in the right spot and it's going to look okay. And then once I'm happy with it, I just put some Mod Podge, which is basically just a sort of a watered down PVA glue. I like it to use on my mixed media artwork because it's really great and stays on and is acid free. You can get that from craft shop, and you could also use it like a decoupage glue because it's kind of the same thing. Once you've put it on the leaves on the canvas, you can then also go over the top of the leaves to seal that paper in. And then once I've finished this canvas, I'll actually put Mod Podge all over it so it completely seals it like a varnish. Now I'm onto the next vine, so I'm going to change up the colours of the leaves on this one. So here you can see I'm just trying out a few different patterns and seeing which one sort of I think is going to work well. That's all you do. You just pop the papers up to your canvas and just see if you think it's going to be a good fit. If not, just keep going through your other ones in your pile till you come across the right one. If you don't have a huge selection, you could even do just a plain sort of book page and then do a paint wash over the top for an interesting look. But for this video, I'm just showing you sort of the process I go through. Now you'll see these leaves on this new vine, I'm shaping them quite different to the previous one. So that's something else you want to consider when you're doing a mixed media artwork, is using a few different shapes as well as textures and techniques and mediums, because that keeps it really interesting. Now this vine here, I'm doing a lot of paper cutting on this one. I've sped the video up so that you don't have to sit through the whole thing, and I've cut some bits out. But I just wanted to say I love cutting out paper, so I'm quite happy to sit for hours just cutting paper out. If you don't love the paper cutting part as much as me and you find it quite tedious, you don't have to put lots of paper on. This is just an example of different ways to do mixed media art. If you prefer to do lots of painting and you could mix up the colours and get some really interesting looks on the leaves, you can do that. Otherwise, you know, even using Posca pens and that type of thing, if you like drawing, you could do that as well. So just wanted to let you know, you don't have to sit there and cut out all these leaves with paper like I'm doing in this one, because the last thing I want is for you to be making an artwork and not enjoying the process. Because remember, the process is the most important thing, that you're having a nice, relaxing, calming experience when you're making the art. Otherwise, what's the point? Now also, you'll notice I've got, you know how I've blocked out the leaves underneath with green paint. You know, you can see that I haven't covered them properly with the paper. But again, I'm just going to, this is just this layer, and then the next layer, that's when we really finish off the look and make those leaves look nice and finished. Remember, once I've glued the leaves on, then I want to get the Mod Podge and go over the top just to seal that paper. And you really want to make sure that the Mod Podge is completely underneath the leaves, so there's no little bits that are going to come up. And that's why sealing over the top, make sure, double sure that you've got them nicely on there. And you'd notice some of these leaves are getting a little bit of green paint on them. That's because I didn't wait for the previous layer to dry. But again, I don't mind that because it just sort of gives it a really mixed media, rough, sort of rustic look, which I'm quite happy with. And I know that when I get to the next layer, I can fix any issues with a little bit of paint, even putting some pink paint over the top if I have sort of gotten too much of the green paint in the way. Again, this style of painting makes me not stress at all, because it's just easy to fix any mistakes that happen by just adding more and more layers. That's the best part of it. I'm finally nearly finished this vine of leaves. Now I'm just sealing them off all with the Mod Podge, also making sure if I have got extra gloopy bits of the Mod Podge around the leaves, I'm just sort of cleaning them up a little bit because I don't want big lumps of glue. Here you'll see I accidentally really got the green in the way. I always just have either a paper towel or some toilet paper or even a baby wipe next to me when I'm working on a mixed media art. So if I do need to wipe anything off, I can do that pretty easily. So in this one, we are going to use a different material. So I have an old doily that I'm going to use for the next vine. So I thought on the one on the left hand side where I've just done little dabs of paint, I'm going to cut this doily up and see how that looks as the little leaves of this one. Could be leaves or maybe they're little flowers on this vine. It's, doesn't matter really. It's just more about the look. And I'm quite happy with this extra texture. I love using doilies in my artwork. I have quite a collection. Sometimes I'll keep them whole and use the round ones as a big feature, like in a dream catcher artwork or something, and sometimes I'll cut them up, especially if they're damaged. I try not to cut doilies up that are in beautiful condition. It's more if they've got some stains or some tears or something. I love to use them in my artwork because they just add a really interesting texture and fibre. Now, I get my doilies from op shops mostly or market stalls, but definitely mostly op shops. You can usually get them for anywhere from 50 cents to a couple of dollars each. Now, if you don't love the look of a doily, some people don't, obviously. Some people sort of feel like it's a bit too old-fashioned looking. You could do just fabric, some nice cotton fabric, and use that as the little leaves. Or you could do some more paper, or you could do some paint or some ink just with a marker or a pen. So it's really up to you. Like I said, the whole point of this course is I'm just showing you a few different ideas of fibres and textures and materials that you can use to incorporate into your mixed media artwork to make it really unique and something that you love to create. As you can see, I'm not super finely cutting them into a perfect shape. I'm just doing tiny little triangles that sort of give off the vibe of the shape of a vine leaf or a little flower. And in my mind, when I'm looking at this picture, that's sort of in the background a little bit. So it's just really there for a bit of extra detail. It's not one of the main focus points of the painting. Now, another important thing that you need to spend some time on is just your spacing out of your materials. So I've really wanted to make sure that I'm spacing these little guys out so that it does have some semblance of realism, even though it's, definitely not a realistic painting. But you want it to, when you look, you can go, oh yeah, I can see what that's supposed to be. Once I finish cutting out all the doily pieces and I've placed them where they're going to go, now I'll Mod Podge them on. So Mod Podge works perfectly fine for actual fabrics and materials on a painting. This, because the doilies are cut quite small and they are a hand woven item, I'm putting the Mod Podge on quite thick because I don't want any of those little pieces of threads to come loose and come off once the painting's hanging on a wall somewhere. So you can see I'm doing quite big dollops of the Mod Podge. And then once it's definitely well sealed, I'll go around the edges and just get off any little extra gloops of glue that I don't want to be sticking out once it's all dried. And you'll notice that I've glued down the left side first before the right side. That is specifically so that I don't get it super messy. So I'm right-handed. So if you're right-handed, you want to start with the left side when you're gluing so that you're not having to reach over the freshly glued section. If you're left-handed, then you would start on the right side so that you're working away from the glue, not over the top towards the glue. So that's just a little trick. And then once you have glued all the little pieces down, we need to go back over the top, like you can see in the video now, with, again, extra thick lot of Mod Podge here, because you really want these doilies to be completely sealed in. You don't want them in 6 months' time starting to look raggedy and falling off the painting, because they will do that if they're not completely glued and sealed onto the canvas. And that would be the same if you're using fabric. You'd really want heaps of Mod Podge on there to really seal it on the top and the bottom of the fabric so it's not going to fall off. This one is just a little one, and it's back to what we were doing before, which is paper. I just wanted to explain though, I was going to do this vine with doily cutouts again, but I actually felt like so much doilies in the painting might have made it look too crafty. Because there is a fine line, I guess, with mixed media art is you do, if you use too many sort of materially crafty bits and pieces on your painting, it can take away from that nice art look. And I love crafting, so I'm as much of a crafter as I am an artist. So I often have to hold myself back with putting fake flowers and doilies and things on, because it just depends what look you're wanting. I want a look of a painting that lots of people will like and think, oh yeah, I'd love to hang that on my wall. So keeping it more a style of art, an arty finish rather than a crafty finish is important to me. That's why with this other vine, I've gone back to paper, and this is quite tedious, long cutting time needed for this guy as well. So I've sped the video up, you'll notice. Again, if you don't love sitting there cutting out paper like I do, and it might be better for you to get a marker like a paint pen, which Posca pens are amazing, and just do some drawing for these little leaves. You could do some really cute little detailed leaves, or you could do painted leaves as well. I actually think the way this looks is, it reminds me of that flower that sort of that long, I can't remember what it's called. So these two over on the left here, I really think they look more like little mini flowers than leaves, and I really quite like that contrast with the small to the big ones. So just, yeah, have a play. And like I said, if you have a look, I stepped back to see how I thought it was looking, and that's why I decided to go back to paper rather than sticking with more doilies or fabric for this one. This one is nearly finished. And again, the same as the other ones, we're going to Mod Podge underneath, and then we're going to Mod Podge over the top. This is quite a busy vine, this one, so I'm not sure whether we'll go over the top with paint, or maybe we'll just leave it as is, and that might be finished. I hope you're going well. If you need to have a little break from the work, you can start and then come back to it a few days later. As you can see, because the hair's so different, I have a few days break in between, and I come back and do an hour or two on each stage, on each layer, and that's how I love to do it, because I've got kids. I can't really sort of spend a whole day just painting, unfortunately. If you've got a specific area that you can have your space set up, that's amazing. If you've got an easel or a table, wonderful. Otherwise, you can just sort of pack it into the corner. But yeah, just work on it when you can. Yeah, I like to sort of work on it at least every couple of days, and I hope you're able to do that too. Or if you're wanting to do it all in sort of one go, you can get your hairdryer out to dry off each layer in between, help the Mod Podge and glue to dry off, so that you can get started on the next layer a bit quicker too. So that's a little tip for you there. All right, last layer we did the putting down the paper. This layer, I want to finish that. So as you can see, when the paper leaves are down like that, they just don't seem finished to me. And because I was really rough when I cut them out, they just need some sort of finishing off. I'm just taking a paint pen and I'm going around in gold. So you can use any color paint pen, or you could use paint. But I just selected the gold because I thought that it matched up really nicely with the music paper that I've used. And then I've literally just I'm going around each leaf, and then I'm accentuating the vine itself in the gold pen instead of the green paint that I previously laid down. And as you can see, it gives it a really bright pop of colour. I'm also then going over a step further and actually doing like the little lines that you see on a leaf. It's kind of hard to see from where the camera is, but it just gives it then another layer. So it really makes the paper really blend into the whole painting. It's not sort of sitting above the painting. It's really like taking it right in there as part of it. So you could do that, or you could leave just doing the outlines. So it would be up to you. And I'm really happy with that vine now. So then we're on to the pink paper cutout vine that I did previously. With this one, I love it, but I feel like it just needs to be finished with some nice paint. So I've selected, now I cut the video so you didn't have to sit for ages looking at it, but I did try my bright pink paint pen off to the side that you see there, but it was just too bright and it was too solid for the look I was wanting for this vine. So instead I just sort of mixed up some pink paint with a white to make it a bit lighter to match in quite closely with the paper pieces that I used. It's still slightly darker, so you can definitely see that there's the outline there. And as you can see, I'm just putting this paint on really rough. And even when I've mixed the paint, I haven't mixed it completely. So we've got, as you can see, some parts of the paint are coming out bright to pink and some are coming out lighter. And I just really love this look. It's really sort of, yeah, it's finished. It's giving the look of a shape, but not super beautifully perfect. So I think you'll agree this technique gives a whole nother layer of depth and interest to the painting. We'll let that one dry. We are going to put some papers and things on the other vines that are left on the painting. So the green paint that I've blocked out, as you can see, that hasn't had anything done to it yet. I was considering just painting those leaves with some nice greens and giving it some shadow and stuff, but I actually have decided to just add some more different materials. So paper, I've got some doilies. So this stage I'm just going through that pile of paper and materials and just really, again, going with my intuition, picking out papers that I feel like I'm drawn to and just feels right. So again, really just going with your gut. Don't overthink it. Just sort of put the paper or the material in front of your canvas, see what it looks like. If you're happy with it, cut it out, stick it on. Remember, if you decide once you've stuck it down that you don't like it, you can literally just get some paint and paint over it. You won't see that paper come through. It'll just be that nice texture. So yeah. Now this, I've added a couple of more doilies here just as leaves. So I really like, because this big vine over here, I'm actually just using a whole heap of different pattern papers and doilies. So I feel like it's not too much of one thing. Now, again, remember with doilies, you have to really add in lots and lots and lots of Mod Podge or glue. Make sure it sits on there and no little straggly bits come off. I'm just doing the same process as last time. I've cut my leaves out, got the shapes correct before I even go near the glue. And once I've got it laid out and I think, yep, that's the look I'm after, then I come back around and glue everything down. Now, if you do find that you get really quite stressed out about, oh, if I stick this down, is it going to be the right thing? Am I going to have to change it? You can just lay everything out first. So for the particular layer you're working on, cut all your shapes out, put them down in the space where you think they're going to go. And you know what? If you decide, no, I don't like that look, you can swap it out. So if that's really like, oh, I don't want to glue it down, just lay the layer out before gluing. Once you're happy with it, then start gluing down. But remember, don't freak out if you do glue something down and you think, I don't like that now, because like I said earlier, you can literally just paint over it. That is the beauty of mixed media art. That's the best thing. It's so good because you can really get stuck in the process and you don't have to worry what's going to look like at the end. Am I going to like it? Have I ruined it? You're not going to ruin it. You can't ruin it. You can just keep doing more and more layers. Layers are your friends, my friends. Embrace the layers and embrace the happy accidents that start off as a mistake that you can then change into something that has a really cool look. Okay, so really hope you're having fun with this. And again, you don't have to do vines and leaves like I'm doing, but it is a really great, easy example of how you can use different materials and techniques and stuff like that. If you haven't done a lot of mixed media art, or any, if this is the first time you're playing with it, the leaves and vines are a great little introduction. It helps you to really
lean into something new that you haven't tried before, without too much pressure and stress, because I just want you to have fun with this. I really do. I want you to have a really enjoyable experience and have this creative outlet in your repertoire of tools to help you live your best life, you know? Because if we're doing something creative and we're not enjoying it, like, what is the point? You want to enjoy it. So just make this work for you, how you can enjoy it. And you might find that you end up making your mixed media art completely different to the way this course is showing you, which is fine. It really is. Everyone creates their art differently. There's no right way or wrong way with art. Literally, it's whatever you want to do is the right way for you. Now we're nearly at the end of this layer, so I'm just finishing off sticking down these leaves. Now I just want to say, with the little vine with all those little flower petals out of the paper, I have decided just to leave them as is because they're quite busy. So those two vines off to the left of the canvas, I'm just leaving them because, yeah, I feel like they're finished as it is, and I don't want to give too much more detail onto that section because I feel like it might take the eye to that part of the canvas only, rather than it being a nice balanced full page. Another thing I wanted to say is do play around with your shapes. You can see here I'm spending quite a bit of time making sure the leaves are matching up with the look of the green paint that I laid down initially. I've sped these videos up, but so it looks quite fast, but I spend a lot of time on each layer. So don't rush, don't feel like it's a race and you've got to get through it really quickly, because you don't. Again, the process is enjoying the actual process of making the art. And this layer probably took me, I would say, a good for 30-40 minutes. I did spend a lot of time to get that really nice finished look because I want the leaves to look nice. Now here I've actually taken that one leaf around the corner of the canvas. You can do that, or you can just cut it off at the edge, totally up to you. So we'll let that layer dry and I will see you in the next one. We are coming over again with paint, just like we did with the pink paint. I have selected a nice green. It's sort of light, so it matches in with the colours on the paper and it blends in quite nicely. Now, because it is quite a lot lighter than the vine, I'm also adding that lighter green to the vine to give it, so it's not so completely different to the leaves, to make it blend in nicely. So as you can see, it's really starting to come together now. That green paint, I feel, really matches in nicely with the whole look of the painting. So it sort of matches up quite well to the pink paint around the other petals that we did previously. And now I'm just sticking with that same green for that whole big vine, even though I used different pattern papers and doilies for this big vine. By keeping the paint that I'm doing the line work around the edges in the same colour, I feel like it gives it that nice, it brings it together and makes it not look too sort of wishy-washy and a bit here and a bit there, and it really brings the whole painting together. Now, if you did see just with the vine that I just painted, I had tried the gold paint pen to see if that looked good, but I didn't like it, so I just literally painted straight over it with the green paint. Which just reinforces what I've said. If you try something on your mixed media art, don't be afraid of it, because if you don't like the look, you can just paint straight over it, which is what I did. I'm really just giving some nice detail to the vines in this one as well. First of all, I just rework the line in that lighter green, and then I come back through and with a bit of darker green. And I'm also reworking the vine on the pink petals, as you can see. And what I've done now is I've gotten a little bit of darker green, a little bit of mid-tone green, and a little bit of white paint. So I'm going along it. It just gives it that sort of shadow and darkness and light effect, which I haven't done perfectly. I haven't made it look realistic because this is not a realistic painting, but it gives it some interest. Now here, I felt like that top part of the painting, the top middle part, didn't have much, it was too much of a big open space. So I came along with my gold pen and added in a couple of extra vines. Now I'm going to be honest, after I finished this part, I looked at my painting and went, oh, why did you do that? It's too much. It's just too much. But like I said, with mixed media, you can't be afraid to make add in things because you think you might wreck it. You might wreck it, you know what? And I feel like I actually did wreck this a bit. I feel like it just got too busy. But I wanted to show you the process of how I fix it. And I feel like I did fix it at the end. So at this point here, I've just added the gold pen and I was going to just leave the leaves like that, just hollow. But yeah, I just keep going. Just keep going and going and going. Sometimes when I make a piece of art, I do jump in a little bit too quick because I am so all about just enjoying the process and going, oh, let's just add stuff. So sometimes I do wish I'd just thought of, like, maybe look away from the painting. If you get to a spot where you've done a layer, sometimes it is good to step away from the painting, go and have a cup of tea, have some lunch or something, rather than getting frustrated like, oh, it's not how I want it to look. Because that when I added these gold leaves and vines in, that's what I had been feeling. I'm like, oh, it needs more, but I'm not sure what. Anyway, I'm adding this in. Like I said, I was going to just leave these vines like this, like quite hollow, so it's just the outline, which can look great. I've actually done this before in other paintings and it looked really good. But as you can see in this middle part here where I'm working on now, by adding these gold leaf outlines, it just started to make the picture look quite busy. So then I thought, oh, what if I just give a little bit of detail in the middle with the gold? And then I'm looking away going, nope, still not loving it. So I do sort of accentuate the vine here with the gold pen because, you know, I've done it now, so I have to make it. I've just got to go with it at this point. So just need to bring that line up so it is a bit more detailed. Then I fill in that little bottom part, which that did need. I felt like that did need a little bit of something. Then at this point, I lift the painting up and go, oh my gosh, I don't love it. So that's when I have to reevaluate. What I decided was that all that gold line was just too much. It was just too much gold. Now you might look at this and go, but why? I think it looks great. That's cool. Everyone sort of has a different view on what they think looks good. For me, it was just too busy. It was getting too busy. It was getting too gold. I don't usually use a lot of metallic colours, so I really like that sort of matte finish. I just paint over it. Simple as that. So I've painted over it with a bit of green. I've still got the gold coming through, but I just needed to settle it down a little bit. And now you'll see I'm just having a little play with the leaves. And then I've thought maybe I can add in some of my beautiful aqua Posca pen to bring that beautiful colour in that's kind of in the background already. And then I go, nah, don't love it. It could have looked good, but close up it was just too solid of a colour. So then this is when you do go, okay, I don't like what I've created. How can I fix it? What can I do to make it look how I want it to look? So me goes to the trusty old paper and I'm just gone, yep, that's better. That's more in line with the sort of naturally greeny colours that I'm looking for. So again, if you've made a mistake or you don't like what you've done, just cover it up. Simple as. So that's what I've done here, and I'm much happier with this look, with this nice green pattern paper filling in the leaves. And I will say I did have to walk away from the painting for about 10 minutes before I tried that aqua Posca pen and then tried this green paper. Like I just said in the video, sometimes you do need to just take a step away because I was actually starting to get quite frustrated because I really wasn't liking how it was coming together.
and if I'd kept going, I probably would have completely wrecked it and then wanted to paint over the whole thing, which I have done before. I have gotten like to this point of a painting and gone, no, I don't like it, it's crap, I hate it, and painted over the whole thing and started again. But you don't have to do that, because it's really easy to save a painting that is a mixed media painting. So I stopped recording, I stepped away, I made a cup of coffee, checked my phone, and then came back to it. And that's when the solution came, and I was much happier with this look. I just feel like the green, it's a slightly different green to the other papers and paint that I've used on the canvas, but I think you'll agree, it just makes it look, it sort of blends in a bit, so it's not super too busy like it was starting to look with all that extra gold. And then you do have to consider, if you're doing something like this where it's patterny and like maybe vines with leaves, I want it to look layered. So you'll see some leaves, I've gone, yep, that's sitting on the front of at the front and the foreground, and some vines are sitting at the back. This middle part, because it is quite close together, I've kind of mixed it up so it does give that look of, in real life, the vines would all be sort of mixed and jumbled together. So I really like that look, and that's something you just consider when you're working on your project as well. Okay, so now that I'm happy with the position of those green paper leaves, I glue it all down and work out what's going to sit over the top or underneath the previous vines that I've worked on. And now here for the bottom part of that vine, I actually decided to try some fabric, green fabric that I've got, just little scraps, rather than continuing that green paper. Again, because I like to change things up quite a bit and add lots of different textures and materials. I thought it was close enough that it matches in quite well, and it is a different part of the canvas. So I cut them out, laid them down, decided whether I liked them or not, which I did. So then I glue them all down. Now, again, with fabric like doilies, but not quite as much, you do need a really decent amount of glue or Mod Podge like I use, just to make sure it's really stuck down onto the canvas properly and isn't going to fall off in 6 months' time or have little loose straggly bits. So I use quite a bit of glue and then seal it again quite heavily with a lot of glue, just to make sure it's not going anywhere. So we will let this layer dry, and then we're on to the last layer. Okay, we've got a few little things to finish up here, and then we are done. So what I've decided to do here, I felt like the bottom left corner and the top right corner were a little bit plain, especially after I added in those extra vines in the last module. So I've got one of my Posca paint pens and decided just to do some line work and create a nice pattern, just to see if that brings the whole canvas together and finishes it off nicely. Now, I love using paint pens because they're just really versatile. They can be used on so many materials. But especially for mixed media art, if you do like to incorporate some drawing in with your painting, they really are an easy way to add really bright, solid texture and a whole different look with lots of line work. So here I'm just going with my intuition. I'm just doing some pattern work. I'm doing I really like the lines that I'm creating now. I have done that in a lot of paintings and drawings in the past, where I just do little lines and then more of these little leaf shapes that match in with the painting, with the other big vines and leaves that I've done. So just sort of filling it out to where I feel comfortable with. And to create a bit more depth and contrast, I am using 2 different colours. So I'm using my aqua paint pen and then a more blue one to fill in the spaces. And then I've just added a few more lines down the bottom here just to sort of finish that corner off. And then I am turning my canvas upside down because I'm working at a table, a flat table, and this canvas is quite large. I don't want to have to stretch over it. If you're working on an easel, you won't have to swap it out and turn it upside down. So with the top corner, I've just decided to go with the leaves rather than lots of lines as well. So I'm just finishing this guy off. And then I'm colouring it in with that other blue paint pen like I did on the bottom corner as well. And then I turn it back up the right way, have a look at it. So I'm having a look at it now, and guess what though? Guess what? After I've looked at this painting with those finished Posca pen line work, I went, oh, no, I don't love it. It doesn't match in. So I literally got some paint straight away and painted over it. It was too, it looks okay, but it was just too solid a line. It wasn't matching in with the leaves, how they were sort of grungy look, where they were just really solid lines. So here's another wonderful example of when you feel like you've done something that doesn't enhance your piece of art that you're working on. Grab some paint, paint over it, done. Now, when I have painted over this, I used the Payne's grey colour, which is what was on the base colour as well. And I don't even mind that you can still see a little bit of those pen marks come through. That's just another part of the texture. I think it actually is great. And then I've done some more lines. I've kept with the idea of lines and dots, but I've just got my big paintbrush with my acrylic paint in that beautiful teal colour that I've used on the background, and then just done some thick sharp lines, and then with the green as well. Not overthinking it at all. I've literally just plonked it on in the spaces where I felt it needed to be for symmetry, and I'm much happier with this. So I think you'll agree with me, those big fat lines just work in much better with the size and proportion of the overall painting. Okay, so now I'm literally finished the painting now. I'm just having a look overall, just any little bits that I feel weren't quite finished. They are getting a final finish, and these green leaves that I added in right towards the end are one of those things. I loved them how they look, but they did have a little bit of the gold paint pen sort of coming through not very nicely, and the paper that I'm using on this canvas, I really love when I go around and do an outline. Whether it's the paint that I've used or the paint pen, I get the outline slightly on the paper cutout as well as slightly on the canvas. So it really gives a really nice look. And like I said before, I feel like it just brings the whole painting together instead of it's like things are being glued on top and it's sitting on top of the painting. By adding these outlines, I feel like it really brings the whole painting together and makes it look like it's all one big beautiful layer with lots of textures rather than layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. You know, it really brings it all in together. And then I found that I missed a couple of leaves, so I'm just adding them in, which is easy to do. That's why it is important to have that one final look over your painting before you get to the fun signing your artwork part. Just have a look through, especially with this type of painting where it has got lots of little details. You just want to make sure that you've finished and given it all the right look. And then here I had made a mistake with the gold. I just completely got rid of one of the gold leaves. So again, I've just covered it with paint, blended that paint in, so you never even knew that there was a little gold leaf there that wasn't looking right. And then I've just blended that paint with my fingers. So I've always keep my paint that I've worked on the background with handy if I do need to go over anything and completely start the look again. And that, my friends, is our finished painting. Now I've done my name down the bottom. I did originally do it with a Posca pen, but again, the Posca pen was just too sharp of a line for this style of artwork. So guess what I did? I painted over it with the Payne's grey paint, and now I'm just painting my name on with some acrylic paint in that beautiful teal colour. Now I used to be really I used to get really stressed about getting my name looking nice when I signed a painting, and I used to try and hide it and blend it in. But I think it's really great to own your artwork. If you've made an artwork that's your style, your own style, you've got quite big feature pieces, then putting your name in paint in fairly big size actually finishes it off really nicely.
So that is it. And once my name has dried, I go over the painting with a whole layer of Mod Podge or water-based varnish. Remember, because we're using all water-based paints, acrylics and papers and stuff, we use a water-based varnish. If you were using oil paints, you would need to use an oil-based varnish. I have made that mistake before where I've gotten an oil painting and sealed it with water-based resin and it cracked after a few months. So that's our painting today. I've completely sealed it and that is done. So I really hope you enjoyed this process. I hope you now can go confidently and keep creating your own artwork. This was my first introduction to mixed media. I can't wait to bring more online workshops for you in line with my in-person ones, but obviously not everyone's on the Mornington Peninsula, so can't get to an in-person one. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Please give me a review of this workshop because it's really important to me to know that I'm creating workshops that you are enjoying and getting something out of. So thanks so much. I really appreciate your support and I hope you had an amazing time in this workshop. Thank you.